It's great to get some time with an AI founder who's coming at us from the San Francisco area today. Andrew Antos, who's the founder and CEO of Klarity. So great to have you here, Andrew. Maybe just to get started, for the benefit of folks at HFS, what is Klarity, the Klarity platform, all about, and a little bit about how you got started?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So what we do is we help companies automatically document the work that actually gets done, because that's actually mostly held in people's heads, a lot of like old existing documents, and a lot of video walkthroughs. We help to really like understand what people are actually doing on a day-to-day basis in excruciating detail, and then we help to automate those tasks.
You've come up through the world of, I guess, we used to call it, intelligent document processing, RPA, intelligent automation, etc. How would you characterize Clarity in the business you're in now in terms of the value you bring to market, and do you fit into a box, or are you creating a whole new paradigm?
We actually never thought about ourselves really like fitting into any boxes. What we really like think that where a lot of the work that we're helping to do is actually done is with a lot of consultants and a lot of BPO work, right? So just like on the automation of documenting everything that's actually going on and helping you get insights into how can I automate my SOX testing, how can I automate all of my kind of like transition to the AI world, right? It all starts with actually documenting what people are doing. Some companies do this naturally in house, but most companies just do it with a lot of consultants and they do it not very frequently. And so we think about that the biggest opportunities for AI are actually not in terms of replacing existing software categories, but are in terms of actually focusing on headcount. Really, what Gen AI is it's a labor arbitrage opportunity with cost that is massively decreasing over time rather than increasing over time.
Okay, and you know, your platform is very much centered around transformation, um, and how to do this successfully. What have you learned about transformation in your time, and what do you think is working and what isn't working for enterprises?
There's always this trade-off between breadth of transformation and depth of transformation. And so what oftentimes happens, a lot of companies kind of end up in the situation where they're trying to transform 7 or 10 different things at the same time with like with very questionable ROI. And so what we've learned, and that's why we launched that second product that I talked about as well on the architect, is you want to achieve both breadth. You want to look at your entire organization and understand how it's actually working, what is the work that people are doing on a day-to-day basis, and then achieve the depth of understanding, like, okay, what are they doing? So you can actually find the, 3 to 4 needle movers that if you actually go in and automate those, you get the 80/20 kind of like ROI, strong ROI on that right up front.
Right, right. And so, as we look at, you mentioned Gen AI earlier, and some of these emerging techs that are hitting enterprises. How is that impacting the transformation conversation? Is it clients are saying, "Hey, can we look at this tool? Can we look at that tool?" Or are you trying to ground them in, think a bit more about the process and the outcome before we think about the technology? How are things changing from that perspective?
So I think like there are two different kind of things that are happening at the same time. So I think like the first thing that's happening at the same time is that the future of automation is much more verticalized than it has been, in our opinion, right? Because historically you had a couple of like automation platforms that would just kind of sit and you can use them to automate all kinds of admin kind of paper pushing tasks across your organization because they were like pretty shallow and very horizontal. What we're seeing now is that everything that we see in the market, including what we do, is very verticalized and very deep, right? So it's like you automate, you go from, some transaction processing that is done by 100 people today, and you go to 3 people and a lot of AI. And so I think the future is going to be much more maintenance of much more verticalization. And so I think the days where you can like have one or two automation platforms as an enterprise are gone. I think that's number one. And then number two, I think it really like starts with scope. I think like scope is like deeply misunderstood, because like we still think about scope as we thought for like traditional software, right? And so you have like exact spec of what that software can do, and then you're trying to say, oh, it's like, okay, well, what processes can we fit into that scope? Now it's the other way around. It's like you want to first understand what people actually do, so you can figure out how to replicate that work, because AI is so much more flexible than traditional software. So I think like those are the two key insights that we got.
Right. So it's created a lot more flexibility into the conversation. So we can certainly do a lot more. There's a lot more options. There's a lot more tools available. And yeah. So when we get to documentation, which I know is very big for Clarity, you guys have talked about it. It's like a must for any transformation. So what do people do wrong when it comes to documentation?
I think there's a couple of key properties that documentation has. Number one, it's almost never a priority, right? Unless you're going public or there's some kind of audit or something like that, or transformation effort. It's almost like never a priority. And so you're always playing catch up. Because it's almost never a priority, it's very rare that you have people, and there's some industries like banking and insurance and so on that do better because they have to, because of regulators. But there's just kind of like lack of documentation. And that means that there's a lack of people whose sole responsibility, or at least number one priority, is to have good documentation. And so there's this kind of like lack of transparency. It's almost like looking at like a contours of a map. You don't actually see the whole map and the detail. And so if you go from this spot today where you haven't automated yet, you haven't transformed yet, and you want to arrive to this spot, you kind of need to see the whole map. Where do all the roads go? And that's where like documentation really comes in. And that's why we build the architect, is to really like help companies understand what the actual map is, where they are today, what's the analysis of that state, right? Tell you like, oh, these are your automation opportunities. These are the tools that could do it really well. This is the spec. This is what the future process looks like. And really, it's like fill in the map for the transformation effort.
What do people need? We talk about documentation now that has changed in terms of keeping it updated, keeping it relevant, this type of things. And how does your platform help with that?
Yeah, so our core insight is that like the how people work, or like how the work actually gets done, is in three places. It's in some existing documentation. It's in a lot of video walkthroughs, especially in the pandemic. Companies started recording a lot of video walkthroughs, so there's a lot of Teams or Zoom recordings lying around. But most importantly, it's tribal knowledge. It's in people's head. And so we have a way where we can take videos in, irrespective of what the structure is and how long they are. We can take existing documentation, and most importantly, we have something called AI Interviewer. It's literally AI that talks to you and asks you questions about your process, and you can share screen, and it understands everything that you actually do. We take that in, right? And then we create the documentation. And then every quarter or every month, or if there's an event, it just pings you and say, do a 5-minute interview on what is the change, what is the delta in the process, and then it automatically updates all the documents, whether it's SOPs, BRDs, SOX narratives, whatever that might be. And so the activation energy to update documentation basically like went down to close to zero.
So where do you see this going, and maybe look out 3 to 5 years, right? We've been doing things very much in a similar way for the last 3 or 4 decades. We have all these tools at our disposal. We have more flexibility. Regulations are shifting. There's also lots more unknowns and knowns. What do you think this space is going to look like in another 3 to 5 years?
So I think there's kind of three things that will happen. I think Number one is like, and I cannot like overemphasize that, but like the depth of understanding of how work is actually get done, I think is going to change drastically, right? Because if you think about a big company right now, you have 3 layers or 5 layers or sometimes 10 layers of people between a decision maker and who's actually doing the work, right? And so getting the visibility and understanding what the work actually is, that's going to change, and it's going to be tools like us that will help that. Like this is like deep business understanding. I think business intelligence and understanding metrics made a huge progress over the last 30 years. I think the next like big step is like deep business understanding. Like what do the organizations actually do on a really detailed level. Second thing that I think is going to change is a lot of things that are done in a cadence, whether it's an annual cadence or biannual or quarterly or monthly, is going to change to a continuous system, whether it's continuous SOX testing, right? Like I'm not going to be testing my controls once a year and then scrambling to fix something. I'm going to be testing it every single day, because the cost of testing, right? That's what we mean by talking about like cost of intelligence is coming down. I can test all of these things for very little money or nearly free all the time, and so I'm not going to have any nasty surprises. I think that's the second thing that's gonna happen. And then I think the third thing that's gonna happen, and that's my biggest question, is what's gonna happen with the cultural shift. Because I think the biggest friction is not the technology, is not the unknowns, but it's just like this is how we've been always doing things, and just like how quickly will people and processes change and adapt. But I think like we're going to start seeing, and I think it's already showing now, the first like true exponential organizations where you have companies that are supporting much more revenue per person than we historically thought it is.
I guess it's all about people and technology and the blurring together of our worlds, and the fact that people are expected to be so much more productive, can handle a lot more transactional volume because of the tools at our disposal. So thanks very much for sharing your platform and the great work that you're doing, and look forward to hearing from your successes in the future. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks so much for having me, Phil. This was a lot of fun.
Right.